And now I'd like to introduce Charles, who is a senior solutions consultant with SyncSort. Charles has been in the information technology industry since 1980 and has worked for Fortune 500 organizations in different business sectors, including insurance, financial, outsourcing, and automotive. He holds certifications in ITIL, VMware, and other disciplines, and is a frequent speaker for the tech community. So welcome, Charles. We are glad to have you today.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for the intro. I'm happy to be here.
So we want to go ahead and get started. And I want to ask you, as an organization grows and evolves over time, IT infrastructure sprawl can become time-consuming and costly. So what are some of the biggest causes of this sprawl and underutilized infrastructure inefficiencies that you are seeing?
Well, that's a great question. In many areas, we started seeing the quote sprawl start happening when the virtualization process took place in many organizations. And with the virtualization, it allowed individuals within the organization to provision their servers very quickly. Many of organizations had a self-service process, which they opened up to the end users to do that. With that self-service architecture, people were just going out there and installing servers, bringing up servers, putting them out there, and maybe they needed it for a day, maybe they needed it for a couple of months, and then they forgot about it. So one of the big things that happened was you ended up with a lot of resources just sitting there within the data center being unused. And what has happened, or what had to happen, and in particular with the organizations that I worked for, is we ended up having to start running reports to be able to see which servers were overutilized, underutilized, or what we called idle. And we started tracking that to be able to see how many resources were actually being wasted out there. Once we started doing that and presented that to management, they said, okay, now what you need to do is to put a policy in place to say that if a server is provisioned and has not been decommissioned after a certain period of time, and it's been idle or been underutilized for a certain period of time, we need to either repurpose that or just basically, shut that server down. So what that brought about, that whole piece brought about, was initially there was no centralized procurement or policies out there. So policies had to be created, and end users had to start adhering to those policies. Now, one of the other things that happened with all this is that users are smart, and they decided that, okay, I'm going to go ahead and provision this server. I know that if it's not used every 60 days, just for pulling a data out of the hat, if it's not used every 60 days, they're going to decommission it for me. So I'm going to set up a reminder that every 25 days, I'm going to make sure that there's some activity on that server so it does not get decommissioned. The other piece that happened with this was because many of the end users did not have the capability to properly right-size those servers, they went for larger servers than they really needed. So that's where you became of wasted resources out there. So their whole fear was, if I don't get a large server now, I won't be able to get it in the future. So they would go out and have servers. So you had servers that were 8, 9, 10 times larger than they needed to be, just sitting there, still processing work, but wasting resources. So what it all came down to is policies needed to be created, and also reporting needed to be created to show users and adhere to that policy. So those were some of the causes and effects that ended up happening. So it was just it was just I can go out and get a server. I don't have to go through procurement. I could do self-service, and off I go. So that's where it came from.
So with these inefficiencies that you were talking about that you're seeing with infrastructure and infrastructure management, how is AI and machine learning being integrated into that infrastructure management?
With artificial intelligence and the machine learning is very good. What that whole concept, the whole paradigm, that whole process is bringing to us, it's the ability to have them have this process, and I call it a process, and lack of a better term, with machine learning and artificial intelligence, more so, is that let it do the heavy lifting out there. Let it go out there and say, I have these rules. I have these rules of look at my server infrastructure. Bring in the information of how many CPUs are out there being used for these servers, how much memory is being used for those servers, how much disk space is being used out there. Let it start gathering all that information and put rules into place that say that automatically that tell me when a server is over, quote, our limit, or whatever that limit may be, whether it be the number of CPUs, whether it be the amount of memory, maybe it's the type of activity on that particular server. And that's what machine learning is going to allow you to do, is put all those rules into place and let it do that heavy lifting out there. So it's going to collect the data from all the platforms that you have out there, whether it's Windows and Unix and Docker containers and whatever types of infrastructure that you have out there. Gather all that information, and as I said, let it do all this heavy lifting of gathering information and analyzing that information for you. One of the other key things that this allows you to do is it brings all this information into a single repository. And the value of that single repository is that you can look at that whole enterprise, that whole IT structure holistically, or from one point of view. You don't have to go to database A, database C, database W out there to get that information. Machine learning is going to allow you to take all that information, bring it into that single repository, do all that analysis for you, and then give you the reports and the output from it. Now, one of the things that people, to me, and this is my opinion, that we need to make sure that we do is machine learning and artificial intelligence and that whole practice and everything is very good, and it's becoming better every day. It's becoming smarter, more intelligent. The more rules that are put into it, it becomes better along. But there is still the need for the human component into that. Machine learning is going to learn the anomalies. It's going to learn the different trends out there. It's going to do the smart forecasting out there based upon the resources that are out there, the resources that it gives you. So it's going to give you all that information. But there's still a need. There's still going to be a need for the sanity check of, yeah, this server it maybe exceeds that criteria, but we know that why it exceeds that criteria that we have for the alerting and then anomaly out there. So again, back to the question is, integrating this into the IT practice, into the reporting practice, is going to allow you to spend more time doing what you're doing and let it do the analysis, let it do the reporting, let it set up the alerts. You're going to continue to add rules to it, to the machine learning, so that as it goes through, it becomes smarter, more efficient through the process. but it's going to help you, one, reduce the manual process that you had before, but two, make it more efficient in the long run.
So, Charles, you mentioned that machine learning is doing what you called all of this heavy lifting. It's bringing everything together, doing the analysis, but you said we still need part of the human component is still a part of it. So, do you think, though, that this can help to address the declining workforce in this space?
I think it can, because as the workforce in many of these areas gets older, as the workforce within the IT industry shrinks in some areas, we need to be smarter about what we do. We need to be smarter about how we do it. And using these types of processes and these types of techniques is going to help you not so much eliminate jobs. The whole point behind this is not to eliminate jobs. It's to help the people that are there become more efficient with their time in the analysis of the data. There's a tremendous amount of data out there that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Terabytes and terabytes, gigabytes, petabytes of data out there. And with that amount of data, it's becoming more and more difficult for people to be able to manage and to analyze that data. Machine learning in that process is going to help the analysis of the data so that you don't need this person spending 20 hours a week analyzing the data. Maybe he spends 2 hours a week with it, but letting the machine do most of the work, let it do the analysis. That person continually makes sure that the rules are correct, tweaks the rules as necessary, and then allows him to look at it from more of a business, a business standpoint. And by looking at it from a business standpoint, it brings in more value to the whole overall process. So in the long term, there is a shortage. How do we make it more efficient so that we're not working 20-hour days out there? To do that, in some cases, some people, and just to be able to help us as capacity managers and performance analysts and those people to be able to do their job more efficiently. Again, as I said before, we still need to have the human element in there. I don't think that, maybe it is in my lifetime, that we're going to eliminate that need, but how can we make our processes and everything more efficient, and machine learning is going to help us do that.
And I think that ties back in. I'm not sure if you were on earlier when we were talking with another presenter. People and processes are a common theme with everyone in the community that we're talking to, with practitioners, with executives, and with our partners. It looks different for everyone, but it's continually people and processes that are coming up.
Yeah, excuse me, but that's exactly it. It's going to help us continually refine the processes that we have out there. And by refining those processes, it's going to make us more efficient. And in the long term, it's going to be more efficient for the organization.
Yep, absolutely. So I want to address the first question that came up again. You talked about underutilized infrastructure inefficiencies. And do any of the companies that you work with find themselves with excess capacity in areas where it's not easily repurposed? And how is that addressed?
In a number of the organizations that we go into, that is a challenge that they're facing, is that they have all these resources out there and that they don't know who's using those resources, what those resources are being used for, and bottom line is If it's a virtualized server, who spun up that virtualized server? Is it a physical server? Maybe there's better procurement policies for that. In some organizations, it's not. So you're going to need that information, and companies are constantly looking at capacity management and the resources. It's not just looking at CPU, the amount of CPU you're using, the amount of memory that you're using, the amount of disk that you're using. It's how all these resources are being used in conjunction with the whole overall enterprise. Do I have enough resources to manage my current day-to-day activities? Plus, a case in point, say you have a retail organization. In that retail organization, you have the marketing team out there, and they say, oh, we're going to do a flash sale on this particular product. And we know that we have this product, and it's going to be the summertime, and people are going to buy this, and we're going to do a flash sale. But then you've got to look at it from a standpoint of, do I have enough resources out there to handle that? So you start looking at it and you start thinking about that. Okay, I have enough resources to manage my day-to-day. Do I have enough resources to handle this, quote, increased activity for the short burst of time? And if I do, or if I don't, what do I need to do with it? If I don't, where within the organization can I get those additional resources if necessary, or what amount of time is it going to take to put those additional resources on the floor? So companies always have I wanted to say, they've always got something hidden away in most cases, so that they can always pull it out of their back pocket, at least what I always did, out of my back pocket if necessary. So when you're doing this analysis, you want to say that my steady state is X. If I'm going to have additional, if it's retail sales, I want to have X plus 10. But I'm going to have over here maybe 5 additional servers just sitting there, spun up, ready, that I could help provision and put on to this other application very quickly. Now you look at it and you go like, all right, is that 5 servers really, is that underutilizing the environment or over provisioning the environment? If you're looking from a strict standpoint, you would say yes. But if you're looking from a business standpoint, you say no, because probably the loss of sales because you can't get through those sales because you don't have enough resources is going to hurt you. So it's a fine balancing act between how much that you still have out there versus how much is going to be very wasteful out there. When we first started allowing business groups to do their own provisioning, and many organizations did this back in the day, we would find servers sitting underneath people's desk, and that type of thing. So we had to bring this to a centralized platform or a centralized process in order to do that. So a long story short is that we've got to use the techniques, we've got to look at the information and look at it not just from a technical standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. And I always say that capacity management and capacity management itself is not just a technical activity, it's a business activity. And you have to ask these questions, you have to look at these things, and you have to talk to everyone within the organization to make these decisions as to whether you're overutilized or you're underutilized, or what's overutilized, what's underutilized, and what's idle sitting out there. Maybe there's a reason. You don't know. If you just look at it from a straight standpoint, you're going to go like, okay, it's just sitting there. But if it's not, but it may be sitting there for some reason. And unless you ask those questions from a business standpoint, you won't know those reasons.
Well, you talked about the processes involved in bringing together all of the data and all of this information. So, who are your customers delivering that data to? And then, what kinds of decisions are companies making with it?
Traditionally, I want to say in the olden days, the data was only distributed to the IT staff, and that information was perused and looked at from that standpoint. But these days, you're talking to many other areas within the organization. You're talking to the business users, the business owners, the business unit owners. That information is being disseminated down to them. So we're looking at it from a standpoint of, we have all this information, we have to distribute it to the other end users because it becomes a business process, a business activity. But we have to, I think one of the key things that everyone's doing now is that we need to tailor that information to the audience that we're giving it to. So in doing so, the same type of reports that you would give to someone in operations or someone within the capacity management group most likely is not the same type of report that you're going to give to a business user, because a business user or a business unit owner, they're going to look at it from how am I processing the work? Am I able to process the activity that I'm required to do? And they're looking at it from the number car company. I'm in the Detroit, Michigan area. So we've got car companies. How many cars are going down the line? Okay. The IT staff is looking at it from one standpoint. The people on the line are looking at another standpoint. I need to have X number of cars past this point at a certain point in time in order to make my quota for the day. So you're looking at it from two different numbers. It's the same data, but it's how you present that data. So everyone within the organization is going to look at it. Many years ago, when I first got started into this industry, one of my mentors taught me very clearly how to present information at different levels within an organization, all the way up to the CEO. And as you start going through that process of what information that you disseminate to them, you start thinking about, again, it starts making you start thinking about it from a business standpoint, and all the way up to where a CEO, they're so busy. They have the only time that they have is to look at maybe one paragraph. So you need to be concise with that information that down at the capacity manager's level may be excruciating in detail, but you need to boil it up to the same information, boil it up to one paragraph or one page for a CEO to look at. So the information is given to everyone within the organization, or many different areas within the organization, but that information is presented in different ways, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So you need to look at it that way and not be afraid to show that information, because one of the key things that I've found out, this information that you give to the end users, the business users, it ends up becoming a two-way street. You start giving them information, and they start giving you information. And by them giving you information, it's going to help you do your job better.
So you touched a lot on data and the importance of data the different roles within the organization and businesses that use it. So for our last question, I want to change the topic a little bit and talk about security because we want to keep that data safe. So how can performance monitoring and capacity management support cybersecurity initiatives?
That's a good question. Every day we see some kind of security breach happening out there. And it can get very scary as to the type of information that's being sent out or the type of information that's being hacked. And the question that you pose is, how can we do this? How can capacity management help with that? Well, capacity management from its basics is understanding how the resources are being used within the environment. So let's take that to the next step. A security breach or cybersecurity breach that happens is because some type of anomaly has occurred within the environment to cause a hacker or someone that's not meant to get into your environment or access to data within your environment in there. So you start thinking about this and go like, okay, we have all this information. We have all this data. We need to start learning this information and be able to pick out the anomalies. Okay, let's look at it this way. Let's say that there's a DB2 database out there that's got critical information in there. It's secured through either RACF, ACF2, top secret. And you're looking at, from a standpoint, the amount of activity going against that particular database. All of a sudden, the amount of activity on that database spikes. And it doesn't spike because there's an application issue. It doesn't spike because there is an issue because of maybe more activity out there. It spikes because something has going out there and trying to run a query to gather sensitive data. So capacity management, and this is where the value, again, of machine learning helps you, is that you can set thresholds and rules out there and say like, if this database gets touched, and I know what the normal steady state is, and it's a critical database because it has employee numbers in there, it's got social security numbers in it of people, and the activity starts going up exponentially, something is happening out there. Okay, something out of the norm is happening out there. Hopefully, it's not a cyber breach. Hopefully, it's just a program that's gone out of balance, lack of a better word. But it could be that someone has penetrated the environment and is going against that database. Now, when you start thinking about cyber attacks and everything, and I don't know the numbers of this, and I don't know what's happening, but there are many cyber attacks that happen from internal as opposed to external. So you're doing the same type of thing, is being able to track the activity against your critical systems, be able to know what the steady state of the activity is against that, and then, because capacity management, you've got all that data out there. If something does happen, start tracking that data and be able to say, who was accessing it? What, if it's a DB2 plan, what DB2 plan all of a sudden started accessing that DB2 database more? Was this DB2 database because you're involved, capacity management's involved in the change management process. Did this get vetted in the change management process? Did we know that this change happened? That type of thing. So it's another way of allowing you to look at the data and be able to say, something is not right here. And what is it? And be able to track that information, be able to go and say that it was over a period of time, it was at a level 1, but all of a sudden it's at a level 30. What happened? So that's how capacity management can help with the cybersecurity, working hand in hand, being able to say, is this a normal case? What happened? Why did it happen? Who was accessing it? And those types of things. So all that information, and it goes back to one of the other points that I talked about, is a single repository. Having all that information in a single repository is going to allow you to correlate all that information together. And that's the bottom line.
Well, thank you, Charles. I think you covered, like we said, you covered the people, the processes, and data security, which are very relevant and very important topics that continually come up when we talk with our members and with our organizations. So I appreciate your expertise on this, and we are glad to have you with us today.
Oh, well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.